Hey everyone, welcome to The Index. I'm your host, Alex Kehaya, and today I'm excited to be joined by Coco Tang, General Manager of Helium Mobile. Helium is by far the most exciting example of how blockchain technology and decentralization can benefit everyone, and it's one that I share with all my friends and family when I'm trying to explain why this space is so important and why I get out of bed in the morning to work on the future of the internet. And Coco, I'm excited to have you here. One of the things we talked about before the show is just like what gets you out of the bed in the morning and kind of what your story is and your why behind being a part of Helium. And I know you've been there since the earliest days, since before even the current idea of Helium was existed. I remember like when I kind of first met the team, it was just like a motherboard with some wires attached to it back way back. I don't know, it might have been 2017 or 2018 or something like that. But yeah, tell us your story and why you're here working on this.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Alex, for having me on the pod. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Coco. I'm the General Manager of Helium Mobile and subscriber side. And it's all about the subscriber business for me. It's all about the customer. It's all about their experience. It's all about delivering what blockchain can do and how it can really revolutionize the telecom industry. So Alex is totally right. He has sort of been in this Helium space since the early 2017s, and actually I was probably in the office when Alex popped by looking at motherboards. So we were trying to figure out if I was in the office at that time. But I've been with the company for over 8 years now, and it's been a fantastic ride. I love working there. And you know, my why changes sort of as Helium went through the different phases. My why for this part of this phase of Helium is really simple. I wake up every day kind of driven by the belief that blockchain has a meaningful place in our world and that cryptocurrency can genuinely improve our lives. And I know with the latest ramp up on Solana and meme coins, there's a lot of new people coming into this space that are unfortunately getting scammed out of their money, scammed out of their private keys, tokens, their time, their energy, and it sort of leaves a pretty negative taste in their mouths on what blockchain and cryptocurrency actually is able to do. So, you know, I see Helium as an embodiment of how blockchain and cryptocurrency can improve our lives, and it kind of fuels my passion and my purpose and my why, right? I'm extremely motivated. I want to see and prove these skeptics wrong, and there's probably going to be a lot more of them now with what's happening in the blockchain space right now. And I want to help others understand, and I want to be able to demonstrate how transformative this new thing we are building and how life-changing it can be for the rest of the world.
I love that, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I really like when meme coins first started becoming a thing back in, I think Doge and Shiba Inu or whatever on ETH were sort of the first ones. I didn't really understand it, and I kind of just wrote it off, and I've never really participated in that part of the crypto economy. And I do think it is a valid part of the economy. Like lots of people are entertained by speculating on the value of these things. And there's this interesting dynamic. But I was just explaining to a really good friend of mine 2 nights ago about Pump.Fun and that whole platform. And she was kind of just rolling her eyes, right? Like, oh, what a joke, And again, no knock on them. They built a great product. A lot of people are using it. It has tons of problems. There's this crazy cultural thing happening around it. But Helium, projects like Helium are the reason I got into this space, right? True disruptive, positive impact on an entire market that really needs it. Really needs that innovation that really delivers a poor quality of service historically to retail consumers. And y'all have built it in a way that any person can use it and not even know that they're using it. In fact, yesterday I saw on Twitter, it was something like 250,000 people, something like that are using Helium as the backbone for their connectivity on their phone through partnerships with T-Mobile, Verizon, and others, right? Some of the biggest names that are using it. And that's incredible. Like that really, I retweeted, I think it was Amir's, I quote tweeted him saying, when the dream becomes reality, like this is the thing we were all dreaming about 8 years ago, was that this could be something like this could be possible. So totally get it. And I think it is one of the best use cases that I've seen become a reality that has real impact. But let's talk about that a little bit. Like what is Helium and why is it so impactful to normal people? How do they benefit? How can they benefit from it? And then let's get into Helium Mobile, because that's like a specific part of, the Helium ecosystem that you run. But maybe talk more broadly about like what Helium is for people who might not have heard about it.
Sure, yeah. So Helium, the network itself, people have called it DPIN. We weren't the ones to call ourselves DPIN, but we were sort of unknowingly the first to demonstrate decentralized physical infrastructure networks back when we launched the original blockchain. I think it was like 2018 or 2019. And it basically serves as a way for things to connect to the internet and send data on the internet. And obviously these little messages have to go somewhere so that it can go online. You can't just send it into the sky, right? Something has to receive it. And our bet was that in order for people to have kind of coverage everywhere, there needs to be little boxes or like little routers that sort of are strategically placed to kind of capture those messages so that can be sent online so that somebody somewhere can use that information for whatever they need. And we believe that in order for people to put these little boxes in good places where they're likely to catch all of these messages, a cryptocurrency would be a great incentivization mechanism, obviously built on a blockchain, a ledger, to motivate people to put these little boxes up. And that's kind of what we did in the early days. So we built we ended up building an IoT network worldwide. We almost had 1 million hotspots. That's what we call these little boxes. And it's still going today, right? The use case has kind of a high bar for people to appreciate, right? You need to have some sort of engineering skill, some sort of hardware knowledge, maybe some coding in order to figure out how to use the IoT network. But for those that are kind of looking for a connectivity solution, maybe they have a dog tracking collar already, using Helium is sort of a no-brainer. And we saw a lot of use cases with the original Helium network, and it's still going strong today.
Yeah, and that was the original idea. And I actually, one of my portfolio companies that I'm an investor in, Baxis, uses Helium for IoT data with distilleries. So they like connect distilleries, so you can see like, oh, these casks in this room are being kept at the right temperature, for example, right, in a really remote area. And that distillery benefits from that because they can't get coverage there. There's no way to get internet. There's no cell service at this location. And so somebody within like a 9-mile radius or whatever it is has like a Helium hotspot spun up that they can send that data to. But then the next step here was the 5G network, right? So you guys invented and open sourced new hardware specs that any hardware manufacturer could then take and sell to people wanting to own a piece of the network. Like literally, the thing I want people to really understand is it's like owning a piece of the railroad or owning a telecom, right? Telecom is critical infrastructure for the world, for the country. And before, you had to have billions and billions of dollars to invest in the physical infrastructure of that network. And now with Helium, somebody with a couple $100 can buy what is essentially a small tower that they install in their house, like either inside their house or on the outside, or if you get like the bigger tower on the roof of a building or something like that. And you can start selling access to 5G connectivity for anybody who uses Helium Mobile, or without even realizing any of these people these companies who are using it as backhaul, which is a really common thing that I didn't know about to the telecom space actually until I started learning about Helium. So like, how did you guys transition from the IoT network to a mobile capable, like a 5G capable network?
Yeah, so we sort of saw the difficulties of getting sensors available, right? You needed to have some background in engineering, like I mentioned earlier. I'm sure the Baxis team needed to have somebody technical on staff in order to figure out how to get these temperature sensors to work. And what we saw that the use cases required a lot of business development and it required a lot of championing around the world for it to really make an impact. For those that are committed, it was easy for them, but for those that are just sort of on the fence and sort of deciding between a proprietary closed network or just relying on Wi-Fi, and then passing on the cost of the higher priced components to the customer, that's what they ended up sticking with. So we had great supply, right? The network coverage was fantastic. We had great supply, but we had unenthusiastic demand. And so we thought, well, what if we created a different type of network that had demand and supply built in? Right. Supply being the network and then demand being the things that actually connect to the internet and, use a lot of data. And the answer became pretty clear, right? It was the mobile phone. It was your iPhone. It was your Android in your pocket. It's with you every day. You can't leave home without it. It is basically your personal computer and you're stuck with it. And so we had great discussions with Freedom 5, which Helium eventually acquiring, because they were building IoT hotspots, but wanted to expand it a level higher with CBRS, which is a citizens band. It is a open source version of a cellular network that has really great range, and that's kind of what we started with. But the problem with the CBRS radio is that not only was it expensive, it was also pretty difficult to put up and install. You needed to sort of orient it a certain direction. There was a lot of regulations on where it can be placed. You needed to register with the FCC, and the usability of it, not for the installer to put it up, but the usability for the person with the cell phone was really difficult. I want to say we were too early with CBRS technology because for it to work, we needed to install a second SIM. And not only that, the phones itself were not smart enough to switch between two cellular networks when it detects that it's out of range of one already. And so Helium Mobile decided and made the decision that, we were too early with this technology. It is not supporting the needs of our customers. It was actually hurting us more than helping us with this type of network. So we decided to focus our growth on these, what we call Helium Mobile hotspots instead, that use Wi-Fi as the underlying connectivity layer instead of CBRS. And that's what we're going with. It's actually worked very, very well because the user experience of connecting to Helium Mobile using these hotspots, using a Wi-Fi protocol, has actually been solved, right? Apple, Google, Samsung, they all know how to get their phones to switch from cellular to Wi-Fi pretty seamlessly. You experience no drop packets, so uninterrupted streaming, whatever you're doing while you're walking in and out of your house. That's not affected. And that's actually how all of these other customers of the other major carriers that you mentioned are using the People's Network, the Helium Mobile hotspots that our builders have deployed. And it's a great feat. It really proves that there is a need for these types of really localized deployments where traditional cell tower companies cannot encroach and sort of build, right? You wouldn't want a cell tower in the middle of a UNESCO site, right? It doesn't work there. And you also wouldn't want a huge cell tower in the middle of downtown Manhattan. It doesn't work there. And so this is sort of where we win. And this is sort of the place where we found ourselves, where we can really make a pronounced difference at how people connect and how others, regular people can benefit from this sort of shared connectivity economy.
Yeah, it means better connectivity for the customer, and then for people participating in the network who have one of these hotspots at their house or in their office or whatever. It means they're owning a piece of the infrastructure, and they're earning, passive income off of it. I do think this is kind of a good segue into like, talk about the current state before Helium existed. What was the state of the telecom industry? What was wrong with it? And kind of like, let's put that in juxtaposition to the future, right? The future of the internet with something like Helium.
Yeah. Okay. So let's level set. Let's kind of, walk back through the history of the big players, right? So you've got the carriers themselves, and you've got the cell tower builders. So right now, there are three major companies that kind of own this like tower building space, right? The carriers outsource the construction work to the cell tower companies, American Tower, the other one's Crown Castle, and then there's a smaller one I don't remember the name of. But these three companies sort of have the stranglehold on the market. And the third player on this is are the people that are leasing the land space for these cell towers to build on. Right? These cell towers don't own real estate, or if they do, it's not a huge percentage of their portfolio. And what these cell tower builders do is when a carrier has identified some sort of place that they want to service, they go, hey, I want to build here. Can you go find a place to put up the cell tower? And I'll rent a spot on this tower to put my radio on. And I'll pay this cell tower company, a couple $100 a month for the space. So the cell tower companies go to, let's say it's a rural place. They just need to connect, two little towns together. They go to a farmer and say, hey, farmer, I have this like huge contract and I want you to lease me this like plot of land. You're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to encroach on it. You're not allowed to have any say in what goes on this little piece of land. And I want to lease it from you for the next 100 years. And I'm going to pay you $500 a month. To the farmer, and they're like, okay, I guess sounds good to me. Like, I guess, right? They don't know any better. They probably don't have the resources to read through this like really huge, complicated contract. And even if they do, the cell tower company can just turn around and go to his neighbor and say like, okay, well, hey, I have this deal. I'll give you $550 a month. Can I put a tower on your plot of land? The other farmer is probably just going to say yes. But what they don't realize is once you say yes, is that there's environmental impact. There's easement that, I'm getting really into the weeds here, but basically a farmer that leases his land to a cell tower company may not realize the consequences, the negative externalities that come from this tower being built on their land. And it is sort of an exploitative outcome for them. So that's how cell towers are kind of put up in rural locations. And in major urban hubs, they ask real estate companies, building owners, if they can put up these cell towers on their rooftops, and they pay them some monthly rent. Obviously, it's more because it is urban, but obviously means that the people that own land just continue profiteering and making more money. And so these cell tower companies, they make money, right, off of building these cell towers for the carriers. The carriers lease space on these cell towers, and they just sort of take whatever it is the cell towers give them, right? Because there's only three companies. If the cell tower builders jack up the prices, the carriers are like, okay, that's fine. I'm just going to raise the price for my consumers and just sort of make up the difference. And that's sort of how the prices just keeps going up and up and up and up, right? And then you've got folks at the top that are kind of not seeing what's happening below. They just raise the price. Like, when was the last time you saw a big carrier actively reducing their prices and not locking people into like multi-year contracts?
Yeah, or providing you with like high quality connectivity. Like I've been through a bunch of different carriers, all the top ones, and I feel like I rarely get good connectivity. especially when I change zones, right? Like I'll drive from my hometown 30 minutes up the road to the next town. And for some reason, I always find I have to restart my phone to get good connectivity up there. And I feel like that's because like I change towers or something. But you know, with something like Helium, that would be a lot more seamless if there were all these Helium hotspots up and down, you know, the highway and like in the cities that I go through where the coverage would never drop really because I'd be connected to Wi-Fi and switching in and out.
And like, why do you think your connection drops as you're driving through towns? It's because a carrier has deemed this like part of wherever you're driving through to be non-revenue generating, right? Yeah. It's not worth the money to put up anything in that area, so I'm just not going to service it. And that's sort of the mentality that we think needs to be fixed, is that connectivity should be available for all, not just like where there is revenue generating opportunities, which is what you know, some of these other folks are mainly focused on. And so that's why you have these like disconnected rural parts of America, or maybe little pockets of really high density. There's a lot of buildings and there's just sort of like no coverage just because of the urban landscape, right? And they're just not able to fix that with what they have. And we believe that we can fix that with what we have and democratize that access, right? So it's not just three, you know, cell tower companies and a couple of carriers making all the money. We're democratizing that, where anybody can buy a little cell tower and it's like $200, right? Very accessible. You put it up to a place, you know, I like to call it like a third space, right? Coffee shops, community centers, libraries, anywhere where people hang out. You put that there and it serves your entire community. And you don't have to rent a space. You don't have to, you know, own property to be able to do it. You don't have to be a multimillionaire to be able to have this little piece of the pie to give back. And that's what makes Helium so different than the traditional telecommunications landscape.
Let's talk a little bit about Helium Mobile and the rewards program. Like, how do people participate in the earnings here? And like, what, like, it sounds like it incentivizes both supply and demand in some ways. Can you just talk about the dynamic there and how it works?
Sure. So let's start with the cell tower, the little mini cell towers, the hotspots, because that's kind of where we left. These little hotspots, they mine a token, they mine a cryptocurrency. They mine HNT, or they will, and I think next month. But they do mine a cryptocurrency that is native to the Helium Network. And the more data, the more you serve your community, the more people connect to it, and they don't even have to be on Helium Mobile, right? As you mentioned earlier, other carriers, their subscribers are connecting to these hotspots and passing data through. They also earn for that, which is great because now you're carrier agnostic, which is kind of the way it should be, right? You don't need to be on a particular carrier to get specific coverage. You're just sort of serving anybody that happens to be in the vicinity. And so you earn, I believe it is 50 cents per gigabyte that you help pass through, and you earn that in the form of a cryptocurrency. And you may earn a little bit more depending on where you are located. And you also earn for, we call it proof of coverage, right? So to prove that you are serving your community with or without data transfer. And so that's how hotspots earn. I think we're going to get into it a little bit later in the podcast, but I'd love to give you an example of like how much somebody could earn.
Let's talk about it. Let's just do it now. Yeah.
So we found this hotspot in a close to a community center across from Central Park, New York City. So great location, community center, serving its community. And this hotspot sees hundreds of phones a day. And over the past month, this hotspot made $1,500.
Wow.
$200 to purchase the little mini cell tower, made $1,500 serving his community, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Like
it's really, really cool.
There's no way in the world that somebody can do this, nobody aspires to be American Tower, right? Like it's not,
Right.
it's not somebody says to Santa Claus, like, I want to be American Tower. But he is, and he's reaping the rewards and he's giving back to the community. And it's fantastic. It's amazing to see this actually working. And now you don't have a ugly cell tower blemishing the beauty that is Central Park. You don't even notice it.
Yeah. And the cool thing is the end state here is you've got these 3 tower companies, and then you've got this community that is the people who own, thousands if not millions of these devices someday that are all over the world powering the network. And then on top of that, you've got an MVNO, mobile virtual network operator, which is what Helium Mobile is. And the thing that I think is so interesting about this is, number one, the community power, the people powered network is really good for the industry, right? Like they have these, like Verizon or whoever has these areas that they don't deem worthy of a cell tower, but they do want to service customers there. Like they don't want my cell service dropping there. That's a bad customer experience. That's a problem for them. And this changes the economics, right? It actually makes it work. It's an economic model that works for everyone, which is why it's why I'm so bullish on helium, right? It's not just that like this altruistic thing, like the economy actually is working, and we're seeing it work on a daily basis now, like exponential growth of the usage of the network. It's fascinating to watch. And then, so the other thing I think is cool, two things that I always love about it is the MVNO, this idea that like anybody who wants to build a mobile virtual network operator on top of the Helium network could do it. You guys are just building your own because it makes sense, right? You're driving the demand yourself to solve that initial problem that you had where you couldn't bootstrap enough demand to support the economy with like, V1 of the IoT network. But like anybody could take that software. Like you could open that up to other people who want to start an MVNO, like a regional carrier, like somebody in Mexico wants to start a Mexican version of Helium, or you could expand there, but it doesn't have to be you.
Right.
Is that part of the plan?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be us. We would love if other MVNOs started, created a company on the Helium network. It just means that the model is working. It means more traffic will flow through. The reason why we started Helium Mobile was to really reinforce and prove that the model works. And we're having a great time building out this company. I want to touch on the rewards for the subscriber side really quickly, right? Because we talked about the rewards for the builders, the little cell tower owners. For the subscribers, not only do you get a great plan, but the information that the network needs is to understand where the future mini cell towers should be placed. And that's kind of where the token mechanism, the rewarding mechanism comes in when you're using the network. So we call this discovery mapping. And it's basically where your phone shares its location and it's fully opt-in. We don't turn it on without you knowing. We also don't sell your data, which is very different than some of the other carriers. They were fined recently by the FCC for not disclosing that. But you share your data with us. It gets fully anonymized and decoupled from who you are, where you live. And we sort of present it on a map for builders to understand where there might be very high demand and where it would be a good fit to create that coverage. And it sort of aligns the deployment where it makes the most sense for everybody involved. So it will motivate people to deploy hotspots in third spaces instead of their homes. It'll motivate people to deploy in city centers, and that's sort of the general guidance, right? You don't have to, but it would be good if you are able to, right? You would have a bigger probability of servicing more people, passing more data, being able to earn a little bit more for your little cell tower. And so through discovery mapping, you earn these tokens, and it's fantastic. I think a lot of people use their tokens to pay off their phone bill. So sometimes their phone bill is $0 every month, or it gets heavily discounted. And I think that's very different than how the traditional carriers are operating today.
It's
Right?
huge. I
They
mean, you
see
mentioned,
personal data as revenue generating.
yeah, we kind of glossed over that, right? Like, but most companies are just stealing your data. I mean, they're not stealing it. You agree to let them have it, but you don't really know what that actually means. Most consumers don't. And you're basically giving up your privacy, and you're making them a ton of money and getting nothing for it. You're just, you're there, they should be paying you for that data. And in this case, the network is paying you for that data. The Helium Network essentially is paying you for that data. And that data is informing future network growth. So one thing that I didn't understand when Helium Mobile launched that I now get is that y'all, as an MVNO, mobile virtual network operator, you do operate like other traditional MVNOs in the sense that you have the Helium network, which you use to route packets and provide cellular coverage. But if someone's out of range of that network, you use T-Mobile, right, as the backbone. It's as a backhaul, right? And that's a normal way that, it's very common in the telecom industry to share networks because they just don't have the coverage they need. And so by sharing the data, by flipping the switch and saying, yeah, I'll take some H&T tokens in exchange for giving you the network this information, the users are telling the people who want to deploy the hotspots where they should deploy next, because they can see there's a lot of activity here. And there's even like a map, right? Like I can go online and just look at what's the URL for that. I can go online and just look at the map and be like, here's the place where I should buy a node. Like I should install one.
Exactly. It's demand-driven supply creation.
Love it.
And the website is planner.hellohelium.com.
Planner.hellohelium.com. Yeah.
It's a mouthful.
Check that out. But it's good. Yeah. Make it something short domain.
Short and sweet.
But people can figure it out. And the people who want to deploy these hotspots are motivated, and they spend the time to figure out where to put them. But that's how you can figure out how to optimize your earnings and where to expand. Right. And I'm super bullish on it. It's like, it's very cool model. We're kind of getting towards the top of the show here. And I always ask the same thing. Like, what have I not asked you that I should have asked that you wanted to talk about?
Okay, let me think. Why don't I give you another? So we talked about the hotspot in Central Park, right? Let's talk about some other communities that we've managed to solve a problem with the Helium Network.
Yeah.
So we have a partner. Let me just make sure I'm saying the name right. So there's a little village in Miami. It's called the Village of Biscayne Park. And so it's kind of like a mini version of a town. They just call themselves a village. They're self-governed. There's a police department, fire department, city officials, government people that work there. They switched all of their phone lines to Helium Mobile because they weren't getting great service with what they were using before. And as part of this partnership, they also installed Helium Mobile hotspots in their various offices, the fire hall, wherever it is that they're able to. And what we saw was incredible. Like yesterday, I was just looking at it at an internal map and just sort of flickering on usage on our customers using the T-Mobile side of the network versus the Helium Network side of the network. There's like these two spots near Surfside, Biscayne Bay, where this village is, that is unlit when you look at the T-Mobile usage. It means that nobody there, no Helium subscriber there uses the T-Mobile side. I don't know why. It could be because there's poor coverage, no coverage. I don't know what the reason is. But when you look at the Helium Mobile hotspot usage, it just lights up.
That's so cool.
It just lights up. And it's because we enabled the Village of Biscayne Park this ability to sort of take connectivity into their own hands. They've created their own coverage. They're using their own coverage. And the beauty of that is it also means that their cell phone bill is probably net zero, right? Because they're earning themselves.
Yeah.
Like, imagine what a boon this would be for all the cities that are struggling with their budgets, being able to have sort of like a close to net zero phone bill. That's another cost line item that they can strike from their budget list. They don't have to talk about it. They can reallocate that budget to something else that their constituents care about. Like, that's huge.
Yeah, I also wonder, I don't know if the technology can achieve this today, but we saw in Asheville, North Carolina, right, a massive outage after this big hurricane. And I can't remember who it was, maybe it was Abhay on Twitter I was talking to about this, but just like hacking together a Helium node with like a Starlink so that you could like, you know, provide coverage in an emergency situation, because like the power was out, and like if you could get a generator to a Starlink, then you can do it. Or maybe if you can just get power to like, I don't know if this is even possible, but like a way to route traffic just locally over any hotspots that are like in the area. I know there was always this like, back when I first met you guys, we were thinking of like creating a mesh network that could enable this kind of like privacy preserving communication, but like on a local basis. I just think there are really big infrastructure implications from a censorship resistance standpoint. And I don't mean censorship resistance. I think we always usually think about this in the government sense, like the government's going to shut the internet down. But actually, like, what if a hurricane comes through and like takes out all the towers, you know, like, and that's what happened in Asheville. Like all the infrastructure got wiped out. These little nodes aren't going to get wiped out, right? Like they might, you know, some might get flooded or whatever, but they're easier. They're smaller, right? They're easier to maintain. And so all you got to do is get them a satellite connection and bam, you've got coverage again over Wi-Fi.
And the other thing, and I don't know if we still have time, but
we're good.
The carrier offload is sort of the technical term that you used for the example of other carriers connecting to these hotspots without the subscribers knowing about it, and that's how a Starlink connected to one of the Helium Mobile hotspots can create connectivity for not just Helium Mobile subscribers in that example, but for anybody else that we've partnered with. I'm not allowed to name names, but some of the big carriers, if you're subscribed to them and you happen to be close to a hotspot, you'll get connectivity. You'll connect, even though the big cell towers are down.
Yep. And I think this has huge national security implications that like nobody's really talked about that much publicly, but it's always been something in my head that is actually super important from a national security standpoint. Just having decentralized infrastructure. And I think like I'm really excited to see where DPIN goes for not just mobile connectivity, but also things like energy, right? Like decentralized microgrids and things like that. But look, I think the work you guys have done for the last 8 years is super important. I am very happy to see you and the team succeeding. I know there's still a long way to go. For listeners, you guys are going to see a lot more content from me about Helium over the next weeks and months. Planning on doing some product videos and things like that just to help educate people on how to get involved and just more on what Helium is. But Coco, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Alex. It's a great chat.
Awesome.